I'm Jeffrey Cornish. I'm the Executive Director for the International Rescue Committee here in Tucson. And our main purpose in life is to resettle newly arrived refugees in the Tucson area. I have a great deal of experience in the refugee camps overseas. I've worked in Uganda, the Sudan, in refugee camps, and also was the Peace Corps country director in the Gambia before coming to Tucson 3 years ago. So yeah, I have had a very wonderful experience in working on the other side of the ocean in that area, and then to come to Tucson and work for the International Rescue Committee to help resettle refugees here has really completed a complete circle for me in terms of care and support for the refugees that you're here to learn about.
And I'm Sharique Ray. I'm the director of Tucson Refugee Ministry, and what we do is connect churches with refugees through the resettlement agencies, 2 of which are represented tonight.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zahra. I came here as a refugee. I'm from Iraq. I have been here 6 years. I came with my family, so I came as a refugee. Thank you.
I'm Josette Kale, and I'm a volunteer with TRM. My husband and I and our children got started volunteering in 2009. We've helped to welcome a couple different families and partner with people at our church and people that we know in other places to do that. And most recently, I collaborated with some other women from different spheres to host a baby shower for a Syrian refugee woman who arrived in August and just had her first American-born baby, her 8th child, at the beginning of December. And we are continuing to keep in touch with her and visit her as part of our Welcome Baby partnership.
Hi, I'm Ferdinand Losolosavi, Catholic Community Service Refugee Program.
Great, thank you. I think the mic's working. Is it working? No? We can use this one then. So the first question that I'm going to ask goes to you, Jeffrey. The question, I think a lot of people, there's been a lot in the news that has to do with the process of resettling refugees. And people are wondering, is it safe? Is it thorough? What is that process? And is it a good thing for keeping America safe and those sorts of things?
Question of the hour.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, it is the question that's probably most heavy on people's minds. You know, first of all, I want to make it very clear that security is the responsibility of the government, right? Not the individual reception and placement agencies like Catholic Community Services or IRC or Refugee Focus is the other resettlement agency that we have in Tucson. So security, first and foremost, is the responsibility of our government. And they need to be very much aware, and they need to be on top of all the flaws in that process so that they can make the necessary adjustments to ensure our safety. That's the first thing I want to make clear. Secondly, as resettlement agencies, we are familiar with the process that refugees go through. It can take anywhere from 18 to 24 months for a refugee to pass through the process of security clearance. There are many different agencies, many layers involved in this process. It all begins with an initial interview with UNHCR when they're registering to become refugees. And UNHCR makes sure that indeed they are entitled and that they meet the criteria as a refugee. And then from there, UNHCR refers them to various agencies in the United States government, State Department in particular, which goes through another series of interviews and research on the backgrounds of individuals. Then it goes to Homeland Security, which go through another process. And sometimes what happens is that These processes have timelines. So you may make it through one process, let's say the State Department, and 6 months will go by and the time has run out. So you have to start the process all over again. So sometimes people are vetted 2 or 3 times, before they actually go through the system in a timely manner in which they qualify to become residents or permanent residents and refugees with refugee status in the United States. So with regard to Syrians in particular, the process is so rigorous, it's about 1 in 10 Syrians are able to come to the United States after the process is done. So the screening process is very intense for them and Iraqis in particular. And I think maybe we'll have testimony to that. And I'm going to give the mic to you right after I'm done. So as resettlement agencies, as experts in this area, not in the security vetting process, but in understanding the process in terms of how refugees are vetted and allowed to come into the United States, we are very comfortable with the process, and the results have proven this. I think out of all the refugees that have come in since 1980, the hundreds of thousands that have come in, only 3 individuals have been accused of, crimes related to terrorist activities, and those were overseas. The most recent issues had to do with the arrest in San Bernardino in Houston, and those individuals were not accused of plotting terrorist activities here, but rather fighting for ISIS and supporting ISIS overseas. So the refugee vetting process, we are very satisfied with, and I think that's an important message that people know about. The last thing I want to say is that I also want to say, I think it's important to keep things in perspective. So when an incident does happen, if it does happen to be a refugee, you have to look at the odds that are in play here and about how rare it is for refugees to be involved in violent crime, how rare it is for them to be involved in biting the hand that feeds them, so to speak. This is their second chance at life. They've lived a life of violence. They've lived in the shadow of dictators and extremist groups like ISIS. This is their second chance at life, and they do not want to jeopardize that. That's another thing we really need to keep on our minds when we're listening to the news.
Yeah.
I do want to point out that we have a handout in the back that highlights the screening process, and we also brought, on this door over here, we pasted the longer process if you want to see what the really intricate details are about the process. There's a diagram on the left, and then there's a there's written text on the right side of the precise process, the precise screening process. So take a look at that afterwards.
Zahra, would you share your story and what it was like for you to come from Iraq to America?
My story began because my brother worked with the USA military. He works 2 years with the USA military as translator. He went for the most dangerous places in Iraq after the war finished and the dictator Saddam is gone. So after that, he worked 2 years with the U.S. military. Then he worked as a journalist with the New York Times 2 years. So some of a group of people don't like some people work with the USA because they have some reason. Maybe they like Saddam. They don't like for USA come to Iraq or. So my brother was threatened from some people, because he worked with the USA. So he decided to come to the USA as a refugee. He applied he has a special effort because he worked with the USA, but he preferred to apply for IOM because he was thinking about my family, like my mom and my dad and like sister, brothers. Yeah. So he applied all the application for us, and I really thankful for him because we are here in USA.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a second question.
Okay.
I think a lot of people, when they hear about Iraq, it's mostly through the news, and they mostly hear negative things. But would you tell us about some of the good, the true, the beautiful things about Iraq that people might not know about?
Sure. Like some of people here, they don't have any idea about the Middle East, or maybe like they don't have any idea about Islam. Mm-hmm. They just like saw some bad news in media, like the ISIS and terrorism. Those a group of people, they don't present like Islam. Mm-hmm. They don't really know about the Islam or Quran. They don't follow the Islam or what Quran say. Mm-hmm. So most of people like peace, to live of peace. So in my country or in some of countries, they suffer from ISIS also. Mm. Not all the world suffer from the ISIS.
Yeah.
Now Iraq suffer from ISIS, especially for some places. Mm. So they kill some people. So these people, they don't follow the rules of the Quran or what the prophets say.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal.
Yeah.
So I heard a statistic recently that 85% of those who have been killed by ISIS are Muslim.
Yes.
You think that could be true?
Yeah. Yes, true. Mm-hmm. Because like in Islam, we have two main denominations. It's Shiite and Sunni. So the ISIS represents Sunni, but they don't really represent Sunni people. Mm-hmm. So in some places of Iraq, like they killed for like two of these people from two denominations. So they don't represent any like denomination or religion. They don't have any religion, those people.
Yeah. One thing I want to highlight with that is that I've noticed something that's been going on as we've talked about this. I think that in some ways we have, when people propose keeping Muslims out of the country, Muslim refugees out of the country, people from the Middle East, Syria, Iraq, functionally what you're saying is that your hypothetical potential suffering is more important than someone else's actual suffering and actual danger. And if you don't like ISIS, in many ways you're receiving the people who have been harmed most or threatened most by ISIS. I think that's important. Ferdinand, can I ask a question to you? Could you tell us about some of the other reasons why people come to America as refugees? Like what happens, what goes on to make someone want to come as a refugee or enter the process?
There is only one way.
Yeah.
You can come to United States as a refugee. Let me clarify this. Most of people believe when a refugee live in asylum country, they are refugee. They are not yet a refugee. Mm. They are refugee when they apply for resettlement. So the only reason they can be eligible for resettlement is if they meet the definition of the notion of refugee. That means someone who has fled his country because of persecution or fear of persecution on the ground of religion, gender, nationality. So they are the only reason you can come to the United States as a refugee. So that's the only reason also we differentiate refugee from the other immigrants. So you cannot come to the United States if you don't meet the definition of refugee.
Thank you.
And the UN Convention on the status of refugees in 1951 was what set this definition. It was a way for the world to come together and decide how are we going to define a refugee, and then based on that definition, what are we going to do to protect them? So the benefits that a refugee receives after they cross that international border, after they register with UNHCR, that's the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, after they're registered and declared a refugee, they are entitled to certain benefits, which every country must honor, including the United States. And those benefits are centered around protection. Protection. Yep, that's our main focus in dealing with refugees on a global scale.
My next question is for Josette. Would you tell us a little bit about what are the tangible ways that anyone in this room could serve and walk with their refugee neighbors?
Okay, well, I'll speak to the opportunities that Tucson Refugee Ministry offers, but I am quite sure that the 3 resettlement agencies also use volunteers.
We'll kick it to them as well.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So TRM has several different ways that they invite people to come alongside a refugee, and just some examples are setting up an apartment ahead of time. Now, I believe it's the responsibility of the resettlement agencies to set up the apartment, but they have a lot of apartments to set up, and when a group of people can come together and pool their resources, the apartment's probably going to be set up a little bit nicer than what the resettlement agency can do with its resources. So setting up an apartment, which can include going and stocking the fridge and freezer and pantry for when that family arrives, going to the airport, making signs, greeting them as they get off the plane, going to visit them, helping them get oriented to the grocery store, the library, helping them understand the mail that comes in. Have you ever realized that you get a lot of junk mail, but when you're just here new from another country and something comes with your name on it, you think, this is important. What am I supposed to do with it? So the joy of explaining what you can throw away. In fact, just casually, just from visiting people, I've had the opportunity to explain what a mortgage statement, what an escrow account is, and what you do and don't have to pay attention to, like I said, in the mail. Baby showers, there's often women that are here and they're expecting their first American-born baby, and they may not have relatives around to give them a shower, so I've been involved in giving a few different baby showers, and that's a lot of fun. There are opportunities to get involved with children, tutoring them after school, going to one of the many apartment complexes that houses a lot of refugees and just playing with the kids on some kind of a regular basis. Those are some of the opportunities that people can get involved in a very tangible way.
That's great. If we could kick it to the men at each end of the table to also answer that question. Yep. What are tangible ways that people can serve and help?
There are many ways people can get involved in resettlement. Like she mentioned, volunteer can go to the airport to welcome a refugee. Before that, we are mandated by the core service to prepare, to set the apartment. So volunteer also can help the resettlement program staff to furnish the apartment, to get everything ready before refugee arrive. You know that one of the main goals of a resettlement program is self-sufficiency. Refugees are here not to depend on government welfare, but to work and to start a new life. So we always advocate for self-sufficiency. Volunteer can help refugees find a job. Volunteer can help refugees, like he mentioned, and start English class. So they can learn English class, become proficient in English, and find a job. So volunteer also can socialize with a refugee. As an immigrant, when you arrive, you are by yourself. Nobody will come to talk to you. So if volunteers just from time to time can go to the refugee apartment to spend the time with them, they will feel good. So
That's great. Thank you. Jeffrey, would you mind answering that as well?
Sure. So I jotted down a few ideas. I think Tucson Refugee Ministries, we're very proud of the work that they're doing, and the volunteer training that they have is a wonderful opportunity for you to be introduced to working with refugees. So I highly recommend that. I think the mentoring, I second that. That's a wonderful way to get face-to-face and become personally involved in a refugee's life. And being able to show them around town, to bring them to the grocery store, to explain banking systems, to help read their mail, all kinds of things that really makes the adjustment process much easier for that person. You asked the question earlier, what would we want if we were forced to flee with just the clothes on our back? And I think a mentor to help us navigate our new life in a new community, that would be very important. So we use our mentors, every single day, and they provide a great deal of support for us. I think also you can advocate on behalf of refugees by reading about it. Ferdinand and I were talking about go on the internet and read about refugee resettlement. And you can write to your congressmen, write to your local representatives, and express your ideas to them, because in the next year, as we have seen in the last few months, legislation is coming up all the time regarding refugee resettlement. And so the more we write and advocate on behalf of refugees, the better the chances are is that positive legislation is going to be passed. I think also cash contributions to the Tucson Refugee Ministries, the International Rescue Committee, Catholic Community Services, that cash will be put directly to refugee resettlement. Yeah, and I'll tell you, we need it primarily for housing. We only have, with our federal and state funds, about 3 to 4 months of housing available for them. And by then, they're supposed to be adjusted, they're supposed to be employed, and they're supposed to be providing for themselves on just that little amount. It's impossible. So what happens is, a lot of times they just need a couple more months, a few more months to be able to gain the job skills or learn that basic interview language, English. And then once they have that down, then they're ready for the employment, ready to be interviewed. So sometimes just those few months, some of them arrive and they need to heal because they've been wounded in the war zones. Psychologically, they need to rest and feel comfortable and safe in their surroundings before they start that second chapter in their life. So that money that is contributed to us, we put toward what we call emergency housing. And this is giving the refugee a few more months to learn the skills they need before they're forced to fend for themselves in Tucson. So those are the ways I would suggest.
So as a quick follow-up to that, let's give 2 equal scenarios. Love to hear your thoughts on this as well, Cherie. One scenario is someone says, I want to give my life to the flourishing of my refugee neighbors. And they're about to they can enter into any program, or they've got the means to do that. What's your advice for them? And then if someone says, I'll give you 1 hour, what should they do? So Jeffrey, if you wouldn't mind saying, if you're going to give your life to it, here's what you should do. And then Cherie, you can answer the 1 hour question.
And actually, if I get 3 minutes to share some practical ways to get involved at some point in the evening, that'll be my...
This is your moment.
This is now?
Yep.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to skip ahead to some... These are the ways that we invite churches to get involved. We ask you as a group to come together, like with a Sunday school class or a Bible study group, and embrace one refugee family for 3 months. That's what Josette and her friends did with the baby partnership. So they didn't just do a baby shower, but they actually welcomed that family and walked alongside them for 3 months. And actually, while I'm talking, Karen and James, if you wouldn't mind handing out the half-sheet flyers that we have over there that highlights these 4 different ways. So these are the partnerships, and then we have special events. These are various things that happen throughout the year that are a one-time opportunity to just get your feet wet, meet some international neighbors, and make a difference. The next one that's coming up is World Refugee Day, which is in June. We'll probably have a citywide celebration. Right, guys?
I'm sure.
Okay.
We already have the 19th planned, or the 16th planned for a...
June 16th
Right. Yeah.
for World Refugee Day.
Right.
Reserve that date.
That's at Catalina High School, and we'll also be doing a citizenship. So the children of refugees will be receiving their citizenship during that time period. So USCIS, which is in charge of citizenship for refugees, will be there, will be present doing that. It's really
That's a lot of fun.
ceremony.
Yes, beautiful ceremony. All right, and then the third way that we invite you to get involved is called rapid response. For this, you can give an hour or you could give a day. You could go once a month or you could go every day of the week. You don't have to go through our training and you don't have to have any background check. You just sign up for the email and you get an email every week that says what the needs are, which a lot of times means helping set up an apartment or going out to the airport, which is the fourth way. We are excited that we now can invite folks to come out for airport arrivals. So you get notice about that in the rapid response email. So those kind of go together. So if you even wanted to get a group of people together from your church and you gave us a date like this week, we're available, then we'll send you the information about which families are coming in that week, and y'all can head out there with your signs and your smiles and literally welcome the stranger. So those are the 4 ways that we invite you to make a difference and connect with refugee families. Some of them are easier than others, but they all make a big difference. And then we also, if you come to our trainings, we help you connect with other organizations and ministries that are in Tucson who are already reaching out to refugees. Like, for example, we have Kevin and his crew who are teaching refugee students. Can you guys raise your hands? You're tutoring. If you're tutoring there they are. Okay. They are tutoring refugee students after school. Randicia Riggs, are you here? Randicia is heading up the Resources for Refugees Center, where they're teaching English and budgeting and lots of other things. And there's other things going on, things that people have started even in the past year that you could jump on board and help them. Okay, so those are all the ways that we invite you to get involved. And I'm going to go back to our Q&A.
All right. I'm going to switch it up. Actually, I still want to hear the answer to that question, so let's go for that. If someone was going to give their life to it, what would they do?
Well, I think there are several ways you could do that. One would be the academic route, and that means to go and get a degree in something like Master's in Public Health or in nursing or in some way that would qualify you to market yourself with an international aid agency that's working with refugees. And there are several outstanding aid agencies, including the International Rescue Committee and Catholic Community Services, that are overseas working with refugees. And this is a qualification that will guarantee you that you will be on the front line and working with them in their home environment. I think the second thing is through mentoring. You know, you can dedicate your all of the time that you have to mentor refugees. And as I say, this is one of the most important services that you can give to welcome them into our community. Third, you can work with an international organization that has religious affiliations. Mercy Corps, for example, have wonderful programs that are working overseas. And also, If finance is your forte, then you could start a foundation that could strictly support refugee resettlement, because they're so few and far between and so desperately needed to help refugees. So those would be my suggestions for a lifetime of dedication.
Once I become a millionaire, I'm going to do that.
Okay,
All right. And then why don't we get the questions? If someone could bring the questions forward on the 3x5 cards. And while it's coming up,
Can you hold them up if you have one?
Yeah.
If you wrote down a question.
while they're coming up, I'm going to go ahead and ask Zahra a question. Could you tell us about if you have a bunch of people in this room who potentially could be volunteers in these organizations, or tell us what are the most helpful ways people can help, the most respectful ways people can help, and what are some of the least helpful ways that people can get involved? What was helpful? What was not helpful?
Like from people to the refugee?
People in America. Yeah, just anyone that you've encountered. Yep.
The most important way to helpful,
Yeah.
people can volunteer for language. Language is the most part of the refugee.
Yeah.
Because most of people come from different country, maybe they don't know the alphabet. So if like some people volunteer to like help them for language, that's be great. Because if refugee know the English, you can find job, you can like finish education, you can raise the children, so everything. So the most important is the language.
And have there been, would you give some advice about ways that might not be helpful? Like people would have good intentions, but it actually isn't very helpful.
Like,
Anyone on the panel want to chime in on that? Yep.
So we know that volunteers have a good heart to help a refugee to start new life. And they always go extra mile to help them out. One thing we always say to volunteers is make sure that they learn from you how to do things. Teach me how to fish, don't give me fish. So the last thing they can do is to enable them when they need something, they will keep calling you. Teach them how to do things by themselves. They don't have to rely on you all the time.
Yeah. Thank you so much. The first question that we have here on the cards is, what happens to the Syrians while they wait 1.5 to 2 years of vetting? Like, where are they during that time? What happens? So, who wants to take that question? You want to take it?
They still struggling where they at.
Yeah.
And there are some of them trying to cross Turkey to go to Europe. You know that European countries also try to send them back home. So what happened to them at this moment, that's why we are here. It's to raise our voice, to tell our Congress, our elected officials that those are human beings as us. So we cannot just ignore them or saying that they are Muslim. In fact, we all in this room tonight, I believe you have one common ground. You are all Christian. I'm sure that's why you are here to find a way to get involved. Therefore, we need to see them as our brothers. So advocate so that they can move from harmful way to safe place, come to the United States.
I'll contribute.
Yep.
95% of the refugees that left Syria are living in countries right around Syria. They're living in Jordan and Turkey. They're living in also, sorry? Lebanon. Yes, in Lebanon, that's right. One of the largest populations. So, and these countries have sacrificed so much to accommodate these refugees. I think Jordan is running out of water, literally, because of this crisis. A lot of times economies are interrupted. Yep. So resources are completely drained, but these people have opened their homes to the Syrians who are fleeing this violence. And that's an incredible thing. The other thing I want to state is 85% of the refugees in the Middle East are in urban areas. They're not in the refugee camps that you see on television. So they're living in apartments. They're living in very consolidated areas with relatives or friends of relatives, or simply individuals who have opened their doors to house these people. So it's an incredible gift of generosity that the Middle East has made on behalf of these refugees. And that is something we should always keep in mind as well. And when we're thinking of solutions to the problem, not only will peace bring a solution, but also to support those countries that are bordering Syria that have taken on this burden, now, and have taken on it willingly. And they should be helped by the richer Western countries like the United States to help relieve some of that burden.
So, Josette, the next question is for you. In a busy, frenetic world like we have, how do you sustain being a volunteer over a long course of time?
Are you busy?
Yes, that's a good question. I don't know. I think it's God working in me. Yes, I homeschooled 3 kids for 11 years. Now they're all at school, and I'm working part-time as an adoption social worker at Christian Family Care and helping out with several things. I just have to put it on my calendar. Mm-hmm. I'm working out to meet with a couple other ladies this Friday, I think, to go visit our friend Fatima, the Syrian woman who just had a baby. I think it's just the joy of doing it that keeps me coming back to it, and the times when it's hard, because I live in Oro Valley and most refugees do not live there, and it's over 20 miles from my house to theirs. But just the joy of visiting with them and sharing the smiles and the friendship, I think that's what keeps me coming back. But it's definitely something I think of like it's a commitment, and it's something that I just put on my calendar and try to do it regularly. And I don't know how many of you in here have kids at home still or grandkids, but I would highly encourage you to take your children. My kids were 6, 8, and 10 when we started doing this, and it will change them, and for the better. It gives them a completely different perspective on people from other countries. It makes them little ambassadors in their school for refugee issues. It makes them want to speak up because they've been in Iraqi refugees' homes. They've come to our house. Kids have played together. We've shared meals together. And when they hear misinformation out there, they want to correct it, and they will speak up and do that because this is something that they've been around. So even though it takes a little extra work, it's very worth it.
Yeah. Zahra, the next question's for you. How do you feel about having the title of refugee? And is there another title that you'd prefer?
Like another title for the word refugee?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just reading from the card.
Just people.
Yeah.
People all the same in the world. Even though like refugee or not refugee.
Yeah.
Still people.
You like being referred to as a person. That's a good thing.
Yes. Still just like Zahra.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Zahra has a new title recently. She went to a special ceremony. What did you do?
Citizenship? Yeah.
American citizen.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Okay, the next question is, I like how you guys put the questions in different angles here. It's keeping me on my toes. What's the difference between a refugee and an asylum seeker?
Well, a refugee is outside the United States. Someone who's seeking asylum has come into the United States and applied for asylum saying, I cannot go home for fear of my life or persecution.
And there's actually more asylum seekers in North America than there are refugees, believe it or not. You just don't hear about them, and you don't maybe know them when you meet them. And these are folks that are applying, they still have to prove the same thing, that they've been persecuted and that it's not safe for them to return home. But they're applying for it after they get here. For example, they come on a tourist visa or a student visa or another kind of visa, and so they're already here, and then they apply for asylum status. So that's the difference.
The next question I may kick to myself here. It says, you say that refugees are fully vetted, but all the presidential candidates tell us that the FBI and Homeland Security tell them that they aren't vetted well. This scares me. So I'll say one thing about it, and then if anyone else wants to contribute. I recently had a meeting with the directors of Homeland Security for the state, and they themselves would say, no, actually, we have a really good process. Like any process, it's not a flawless process, but it's really good. Like better than a baseball player's batting average, kind of good. Way better than that.
Well, it depends on what baseball player.
It depends on what baseball player. Yeah, but it's a good, thorough process that those people aren't running for election, and so they can tell you. Anyone else want to chime in on that?
No, I'll just reinforce it. I think that Americans can sleep safely in their beds and sleep well knowing the system that we currently have in place. As a matter of fact, it's being modeled by Europe now. We have been begging Europe to adopt our system of security vetting because right now, the situation is so chaotic that they cannot track people, and this is where the fear is coming from, really. So the Americans have a very well-established and practiced vetting process, and so I will say it's not flawless. That's right. There may be people who can come in. The director of the FBI, Casey, said it himself. You know that we are not satisfied in some cases with some refugees with the vetting process. But I have to tell you, the vetting process is such that if they are not satisfied, that person's application is simply rejected. You know, so this is an example of how the vetting process works. If they cannot gather enough information on an individual, then that individual is denied entry into the United States.
I think we just have time for one more question.
Okay, great. One more question. Zahra, you get the last word. What 3 qualities are most helpful in a mentor? If someone is coming to help you out, what 3 qualities do you want to see in that person?
Like to help a refugee? Or?
Yeah. What do you want to see in their character and who they are as a person? What are the 3 best things?
The honest.
Honest, yeah.
Yeah, the honest people. The respectful. This is the most important thing for me. So that's why I like. And I feel very excited because I met wonderful people here. So I met nice people, honest people, help us for these years when I came. So I'm very thankful I'm here.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And we're thankful for that you're here, and we're thankful for the work that everyone does on this panel and your contribution to the panel tonight. Can you give them a hand, please?